As you already know, 2020 was the year of the corona pandemic in terms of the news coverage, but today we're going to take a look back at the most important stories that helped shape Europe in 2020 that you might have missed out on because of the intense pandemic coverage. Make sure to watch until the end and let me know which one was the most influential to you. France was really struck badly by the pandemic, but 2020 was also a year where France had a record 7 terror attacks committed against them. The one that actually broke through the pandemic news cycle the most was the barbaric beheading of Samuel Paty in the streets of Paris. The terror attack really shocked France because Samuel Paty was teaching his students about freedom of speech. So in a response, the French people started massive protests in the streets. Soon after, President Emmanuel Macron responded with a swift action against radical Islamic groups in France, but in doing so, he also tried to pass a law that would make it illegal to record police officers doing their jobs. This had the potential to strongly limit the freedoms of the citizens in France, and after multiple huge protests against that law, the so-called Article 24, Macron's party looked like it gave up on that new law. Obviously, all of the unrest has left the people of France very uneasy, but at the very least it shows people that there's still a point in protesting. It does still work. Merci, on y va! The UK finally got their Brexit and officially parted ways with the EU in January, but it was only on Christmas Eve, just over a week before the official transition period ended, that they got a huge new trade deal signed. The deal itself had been negotiated over most of the year up until Christmas, and it even looked unlikely that a deal would be reached at all. Now, it's safe to say that the deal is imperfect, no matter how you look at it, whether you're for a Brexit or you're against it. But at the very least, at the end of the day, the will of the people was carried out. And in a democracy, that's really all you can hope for. Over in Eastern Europe, both Poland and Belarus had huge protests throughout big parts of 2020, but for different reasons. In Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko won more than 80% of the vote after 26 years in power, leading many of the opposition leaders to claim that the election was rigged. In the weeks after the election, massive protests started in the capital Minsk with hundreds of thousands of protesters, which is a lot when you think about the fact that Belarus only has a total population of around 10 million people. Now, the tragic part is that many of the opposition leaders are now either in jail or they're in some form of exile from the country, and that includes Lukashenko's challenger Svetlana Chishkia, well, that lady. Poland also had their protests as well, but on a much smaller scale, with thousands of people gathering to protest the re-elected Andrzej Duda, who appointed judges who then ruled that abortion essentially would be illegal. 2020 was also a year that saw record numbers in Europe's migrant crisis that got almost no coverage because of the pandemic news. I dedicated a good amount of time and videos into making sure that you guys know what's going on with the migrant crisis in Europe, but in case you missed it, here's a few bullet points. So typically, migrants would come from Syria and North Africa into southern European countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain. This year, however, Italy and Spain shut their borders down because of the pandemic. Greece tried to do the same, but a little too late, and so was flooded with almost all of the migrants. Some of these migrants would end up on islands off of Greece, but there wouldn't be anywhere near the space they needed to house them all. So when a fire broke out in one of these islands, thousands and thousands of migrants had to be relocated, and in that process, almost all of them are now unaccounted for, meaning they have either traveled deeper into Europe or they are still living in Greece, probably without much to live by. France and the UK had their own issues with the European migrant crisis in 2020 as well. Even though France was suffering heavily under the pandemic, they still took in a lot of these migrants coming up from Greece, and now they are overflowing into the UK, even though the UK has shut down their borders. So these migrants are making the dangerous journey across the sea from France into southern England. So some of these southern English cities are now seeing an increase in illegal migrants of around 400%. It got to such a point where the British Royal Navy had to be deployed and turn around these boats and sometimes just rafts coming across the waters if the Navy intercepted them. It's a huge issue, and I'm sure it will continue into 2021, so I'll make sure to update you guys as we go. On that same note, the whole reason that the migrant crisis is happening right now in Europe is that the EU is split on how to treat these migrants. Countries like Germany and France are leading the way in trying to take in as many migrants as they can, but obviously now it's causing these illegal immigrants to come into the UK because it's overflowing from France. They can't control all of the migrants they take in, so obviously it's a huge issue. Expect to see a lot more tensions on the migrant crisis in 2021 because you have a lot of nations within the EU saying no more migrants, we've taken as many people as we can, while you have the leading nations of the EU saying we need to take in more migrants. It's going to continue in 2021, and I'll make sure that you guys stay on top of it. Spain was also hit pretty hard by the pandemic as well, which has initiated a trial period of a universal basic income plan in Spain, or a UBI. No country in the world has a UBI in place, so Spain would be the first country to implement such a law, which would give a minimum of 700 euros to up to 2.3 million people who would be eligible. A lot of people are saying that this is a huge breakthrough of providing people with a basic income to survive tough times, and that's a really good point. But at the same time, that means that the Spanish government or companies will be paying out 1.6 billion euros every single month. And at least right now, it looks like it's well on its way to happening. In Russia, Alexander Navalny, who is the opposition leader to Putin, got poisoned and was sent to a hospital in Berlin in Germany. The poison was a Soviet-era nerve agent called Novichok. So Navalny is saying that the Kremlin used that specific poison to send a very strong message. And of course the Kremlin is saying that it would be too obvious of them to use such a poison, suggesting that other nations might have set them up. Either way, Navalny surprisingly survived the poison attack and has now vowed to, as soon as he's fully healthy, to come back to Russia and lead the opposition against Putin and the Kremlin, which he has been very outspoken about. So that's very exciting for 2021 as well. I think we can all agree that the pandemic hit us really hard in Europe in 2020, but I do have hope for 2021 that we will come out stronger and that we might even find a solution to the pandemic, that we'll get over it and move on from here. I read a lot of the news, and I know that the news in general can be very negative and sometimes put you down, but I want you to remember all of the good things that you do still have in your life as well. Go outside, breathe in the fresh air, and don't let yourself be frightened by the daily news of, especially with the pandemic, where a lot of people are becoming fearful. And I think it's really important that you remember to keep a perspective in your life. Don't let yourself be overcome with fear over something that you basically can't control more than to the extent that you can. So here's to hoping that 2021 will be a lot better than 2020. Thanks for staying with me, guys, until the end of the video. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and together we will make 2021 a lot better. See you in the next video, and God bless you.